Dr. Bruce Richardson is a senior lecturer in English at the University of Wyoming. And I think almost the entire part of your career at the university has been at the branch campus in Casper, which is dear to my heart because that's where I spent a lot of time as well. Bruce himself notes that his major accomplishments are being a leader in the efforts that doubled the Wyoming Arts Council budget and transformed the Arts Board into an advocacy group. He's been a leader in achieving national recognition for arts in Wyoming, and a leader in successful redesign of the Casper Nicolason Art Museum Board and governance. And that helped take that museum from a large deficit to a sustainable and professional operation. But I, like Bruce's students, many of us know that Bruce's most notable achievement has been inspired and exciting teaching. I've watched Bruce teach. Teaching of hundreds of students in classes on Shakespeare, Chaucer, horror literature, American landscapes, American prose, and technical writing, among many other things. He's been teaching at the university for 31 years. He's going to, I think next month, be transformed into an emeritus faculty member at the university because he's just retiring. For his lasting work, Bruce was awarded the L. Bogan Lifetime Teaching Award at the university. He received his baccalaureate degree, his master's degree, and his PhD from UCLA. Bruce has been recognized for his work as a citizen and an arts advocate, and with this Casper Citizen of the Year Award in 2012. And he was recognized in 2014 with the Wyoming Governor's Arts Award. His interests go beyond the arts, beyond teaching, beyond citizen advocacy. In fact, I was listening to him this morning. His interests include geyser gazing, art and book collecting, and pro basketball statistics. So amazing what these English professors can do. Today, Bruce is going to talk with us about a topic in which he is expert, arts activity in Wyoming and the impact it has on all of us. So please welcome Dr. Bruce Richardson.
Thank you, Maggie. Not as impressive as all that. This is a handout-based presentation. There's no PowerPoint. So we're going to coming around, and I've got some lists and some statistics. You can look at them and puzzle about this. I'm planning on going pretty fast and doing this in about 35 minutes so we can have conversations, because this is something you all know about, and I came here to learn from you about things. I think the context of my work would be, it started off with the as arts advocacy, and then there's a kind of tension between doing advocacy, because you're kind of looking at the data and looking for things that are good for your arguments, good for the case that you want to make. But there's another side of me that is just curious about what the heck's going on in the arts in Wyoming. How can we describe it? There's a good place for the arts. Is there lots of arts? Is there not much? What is it like? What's it going on? And a lot of ways to answer that question, and we'll try to go at it through 3 data sets and see what they're indicating. And I'll try to critique the data sets a little bit, but these are all fairly detailed things, and there's a lot that's going to be wrong and a lot that's going to be right. I'm interested, to some extent, in the what the data sets mean indirectly. What do they tell us about the daily life of the citizens of Wyoming and what kind of arts are going on? And we all know things, but this was an attempt also to partly answer questions like, oh, is Wyoming a good place for the arts? So I used to have these, my sister worked for IBM in Burlington, Vermont for years. And Burlington's a little bigger city than the city I live in, Casper. Not that much bigger, it's about 60,000. And they have a 10,000 person IBM plant there. And so I was saying, oh, why do you have it here in Burlington, Vermont, where the weather's actually worse than it is in Wyoming? By quite a bit, and not in Wyoming, where we have lower taxes and a lot of nice things and so on. And he says, well, our employees really like to go to arts events. I don't think you have very many in Wyoming. So started thinking about that. And Burlington's got a lot, there's quite a few things going on. So we were pretty excited at the Arts Council to subscribe to the Creative Vitality Report, and that's this thing. I've got 2 pages here. One is some assumptions I drew out of the first set of the Creative Vitality Report from 2006 to actually 2009, and we've got data up to 2012. And there was a surge of patriotism among us and the Arts Council when we got this report, because I don't think we expected to be the second leading arts state in the Rocky Mountains. I don't think we expected to be above the national average. So let me take you through what the data says. And Creative Vitality Index is developed by the Western States Arts Federation in Denver and is a national document. It's an index that allows you to compare what they call creative vitality across the nation, state by state, city by city, region by region. They boil down a tremendous number of factors into this one number. And the one number is the national average. So the national average is 1.0. So if you see anything above 1.0, you're above it. If it's below 1.0, then you're below the national average. What do they measure? A lot of it is information about what they call creative industries, and we'll talk about that because it's of great importance here in Sheridan. On the back of this particular sheet is a list of the creative occupations that they consider, and some of them are things that are of great interest to me. They're photographers, visual artists, musicians, dancers, things of that sort. The creative industry definition that they use includes some surprises. Florists, maybe. Landscape designers, people who are technicians that work in media industry and things of that sort. But in focusing on the creative industries, they picked on something that was of great, great interest nationwide, and it was part of an attempt, I think, by people who were arts advocates to put themselves in a larger context, the context of not just workers in the arts, but workers in related types of industries that might end up in taking up a large part of the scene, of the economic scene. The difficulty with the creative industries research movement, though, is that there's really no standard list. So you can find other kinds of lists, and they'll have other things that are on the list or not on the list. So, for example, Sheridan has Stuart Rosenfeld come on out, and he did a survey of the creative industries in Sheridan in 2008. The report came out, and he's got a little different list than the CVI. So Rosenfeld's list, and we'll see that, found that almost 6% of the labor force in Sheridan was in a creative industry. And his is actually a little tighter list than they've got right here. Well, why does he know that? Well, partly he went and walked the streets and found everybody that was doing it, okay? He looked at data sets, but it wasn't just a data set based thing. So there was somebody doing fine leather work. Rosenfeld found him. He made phone calls, he goes around, and he found something else that these data sets can't find: part-timers who are invisible. The lists of most of these occupations that we have here are from the tax rolls. So if somebody identifies themselves as a professional photographer, then they pop into the list here. But they might be a pretty serious photographer, pretty serious art photographer. They might have a bit of a business going on, but if it's the side business, then they don't pop into the list. So Rosenfeld's this kind of on-the-ground thing, we'll find a little bit more. But what's useful for this kind of index is that it tells us it's used the same way everywhere, so we can put Wyoming in context. So what does the context say? Context says that indexed for population, Wyoming's above average. That's nice. Everyone wants to be above average. And so that was pretty good. But there's other context. The context is the region. So I go down the Rocky Mountains and I say, where's the big art centers in the Rocky Mountains? What is it? Well, I think of New Mexico. I think of Santa Fe. I think of Taos. And I think of the opera in New Mexico. I think of all the artists that live there in the galleries. And then I may think of Denver. Wyoming has consistently been higher on this list than New Mexico, quite a bit. And in fact, within the region, over the run of this things, Wyoming is about a third ahead of the regional average. More than Montana, more than Utah, more than Idaho, more than New Mexico, much more than Arizona, less than Colorado. Colorado's got a lot of stuff going on here. So we were pretty excited about that. Caveats. Then let's look down at the details. What does it mean to the state as a whole? And you find this phenomenon. 2 counties account for an awful lot of this. Teton County and Park County, Jackson and Cody. And this issue kind of comes up and shows up in multiple studies, and we'll run into it again. Jackson is off the charts in terms of amount of art activity, off the charts, ranging from 8 times the national average, 8 times, to 6 times. And that's it's so large that when Americans for the Arts did their Arts and Prosperity study for the whole country, they threw Jackson out of the statistics because it distorted the statistics for the nation so badly. And within city rankings here, Jackson consistently is first, second or third in the nation all the time. And so those statistics really affect kind of what's going on in Wyoming. We're sort of interested in the bigger picture. So a lot of art's going on. Well, Park County and Cody is quite a bit, and that's understandable. The other clustering of strong counties in Wyoming are Sheridan, which is consistently third, Johnson County, and Natrona. And then I'm fascinated just what's going on here? I mean, there's a little geography happening here, Sheridan, Johnson, and Natrona. And things come and go with other counties. In Wyoming, the population's so low that some of these numbers just go crazy. So Lincoln County goes nuts, 1 year. Well, they had a big building development project, and it just threw the numbers out of whack. Then the next year they went back to pretty much normal. And so those kinds of things happen. But we got a little bit of a model of how things roll in Wyoming. And the model is consistent with some of the other data that we have here. Numbers of artists. Wyoming's second in the nation in number of photographers. That's consistent. First is Hawaii. Figure it out. Scenery. Yeah, there's something going on right here. We also have the presence of quite a few visual artists. We've always been consistently above the nation's rankings there, and writers. Writers like it here. And the number of writers we've got has been running around 700 on this particular list. So I did an experiment one time. Does this tell us how many writers there are? And so I did a talk at Wyoming Writers Association, and the writers, again, are people who list writing as their profession and their taxes. So I had a room of about 80 people. I said, how many in this room list writing as on your taxes as your profession? And 8 of them, 8 people, raised their hand. And I knew who was in the room. The other people were making money from writing. They were selling. So if you wanted to go down to the part-time thing, the number is much, much larger. And if the number was that large, it would be more people than worked in the coal industry. There are 4 times as many full-time musicians in Wyoming as cowboys. About 791 to 200. It doesn't count people who are both cowboys and musicians, okay, which is a large group themselves, and they might crisscross and suggest maybe that some cowboys list themselves as musicians going on. And then we've always had fun. There's weird things in here, and we can talk about that later if you want, but we've just been puzzled by the fact that Wyoming seems to lead the nation in number of choreographers. And this suggests, at different points, I think, this survey is not worth anything at all. I mean, there can't possibly be that many choreographers there. There aren't very many dancers, so people may be calling themselves choreographers on their taxes, but we're way above the national average. The other thing that kind of jumps out, and that might say something about the state, and it's worth thinking about, is that we are way ahead of the rest of the nation in selling visual artworks. Way ahead. Our number for doing that is 2.23. We're like 123% ahead of the rest of the country in doing that. And I think that probably means at some point something about Park and Jackson, that, these are places that attract folks that want to buy high-end artwork, paintings, and things of that sort. And they like Western art, and they can buy it there. So, Creative Vitality Report. Well, what's wrong with it? I've suggested a couple of things, but of course the other thing is, does it really tell us what's going on in Worland or Sheridan or Casper? A lot of stuff's under the radar that doesn't come into a big report like this. But overall, we're in the game. We're in the game, and it's interesting, and other things go that way too. Second report is, we go to the other sheet that I've got here, is the National Arts Index. This is a report that's done by Americans for the Arts, and their aim right here on the index is to Americans for the Arts is the big advocacy group for arts. They're pretty well known. They put on National Arts Day in Washington, D.C. They've got a lot of money. They're supported by, Robert Redford helps them, and Alec Baldwin and various other people, but they do a lot of kind of service work too. And so they've tried to come up with this index as a way to track over time how arts are going in the United States. It is a really complicated index, and includes a whole lot of things, to come up with one sort of number. But there's a focus on money, of course, how much spending is going on, how individual arts groups are doing, but they focus on other things like how many people are majoring in art in college, and they focus on the participation numbers. Who's going to events? Who's not going to events? What are going on? I'm not sure about the strength or validity of the number that they come up with. They've got a baseline, but it's nice to have, and it allows them to sort of do some publicity there. But the report itself, I recommend it to you. Just type it in there, and it's very, very interesting. It's full of stuff that is surprising or interesting. I'm interested in something like patterns of volunteering. You know, if you've got an area that's productive and that people like, you figure there's going to be lots of volunteers. And the number of volunteers in arts organizations has been going up steadily for 3 years. That's something. So it also talks about private donations. The percentage of the number of private donations to arts has been going up quite a bit, and also more so than donations to other fields. Foundation numbers have been going down over 4 years. None of this is in my handout that I gave you. Attendance studies are always interesting, and opera's been plummeting. That's been happening for a while. Symphony orchestras are hovering downwards. Broadway is up. Nonprofit theaters of the sort that we have in Wyoming have been shooting up in a steady kind of thing. So a lot of little things there that are worth puzzling out in the general report. But what can it tell us about the scene here in Wyoming? Well, they don't try to index or come up with a basic number for what's happening, but they do have a blizzard of statistical information about arts activity, spending, donations, and things, county by county for Wyoming. And there's way too much to look at, and the levels of information that they have, I think, each one takes up about 6 pages of things, so there's much more than this. But what I did here was, just for fun, I picked a few questions for Sheridan County and compared them to Natrona, right there. And so the first number is total nonprofit art expenditures per capita. And in Sheridan, it's varied from I'm having trouble reading my numbers here. Oh, okay, well the last one is $114 a pop, $115 a pop, and in Natrona County, average person spends $51. What does that mean? You must be going to the YO Theater. I mean, what's happening? Right? Is that it? You must be going to events at Sheridan College. You must be, that's a big difference. Natrona County is quite busy. And there's quite a few things right here. So a lot of stuff. Donations, individual donations. That's an interesting thing because that indicates, I think, to me, levels of support for something. So if you've got a community that likes sports, you're going to see donations to sports, not just attendance and spending on that. And donations per capita, $100, $186, $84 for Sheridan, comparable numbers for Casper, $31, $38, $27. You're donating a whole lot more than Natrona County. That's a whole lot more, and that was that stood out as, again, as third in the state, behind Teton County. And this one I have to throw out. The numbers there are $1,000 a person. And figure it out too. It's a very, very wealthy county, and Grand Teton Music Festival is $1 million operation. So by itself, the Wildlife Museum and the Grand Teton Music Festival will probably account for a great deal of that. How many solo artists here indexed for population? And Sheridan, 130, Natrona, 142. But down here, you've got in 2013, you've got 254, Natrona, 149. Again, Jackson or Teton County has about 1,000. How do they live there? They must be making some money. What's the deal? How does that work? This is of interest, though, is the number of creative businesses, which had been an effort in Sheridan to increase that. number. And again, you are substantially ahead of Natrona County and substantially ahead in terms of percentages. So that's a kind of interesting look, and it doesn't tell you exactly what's happening in the details. And I think one of the limitations of this sort of study too, besides the fact that it's publicly available statistics and there's not an individual investigation, is the lack of information about things that are actually quite important. And the other thing I would really like to know, and this is what's going on block by block. How many people make pottery in Sheridan? How many people paint? How many people are writing? How can you know that? And none of these things can get at something like that, because that would indicate to me a certain level of interest, vitality, and how does that change over time? When the Nicolayson Art Museum set its goal, one of the goals was they wanted an increase in the amount of art making and knowledge of art to the people of Natrona County. Well, the only way they can tell if that's happened is if they've got some information, and they don't. They haven't got that. There's room for that in Americans for the Arts thing. They've got questions on how many people play a musical instrument in your town. They've got questions like that. And that would be important information, because beyond this economic issue, probably the crucial thing we're talking about is a connection between the behavior of a town and other measures of vitality. So the University of Pennsylvania has been studying blocks in Philadelphia to find out what's going on, not just in the arts, but in everything. What characterizes the block? And they're finding some general relationship that if the block has a lot of people making pottery, graduation rates are a little higher, crime's a little lower, voting's a little higher, other things are happening. So we're kind of interested in that. But the fact that people spend a bunch of money on a concert doesn't really tell you that. And there are other things about the arts and vitality that might be more interesting to know than what the after report is. After report is fun, though, and you sit around, and if you're from Sheridan, too, you can just sit around and gloat because you're clobbering all the counties in Wyoming, except for Teton County. Just do not go there. Never look, never look, never look. Yeah, got to look away. The last one I would do is it's on the back of the other sheet is, now we have a new word. The word in these other two things was vitality, and now our word is vibrancy. So I want to think about that. That's the name of the development area. Is Sheridan, it's vibrant right now. It's vibrant communities, not vital communities. Is that right? It's vital, not vibrant? Vital, okay, vital communities. That's probably good. Vital means alive. I guess vibrant means oscillating or changing around or vibrating. But they're interested here in trying to get at something else that maybe the vital ones don't quite get, which is there a kind of dynamic art world? Is the commitment there significant? And so the National Center for Arts Research at Southern Methodist University did this. And this is pretty new stuff. This came out about 6 months ago. And if we had internet here, I'd show you their map. The other thing was they came up with a vibrancy metric I'll describe, and then they came up with a map showing how the United States looks with, they call it the heat index. So the hot areas are very dark, and the areas with little activity are white, with gradations in between. So it's kind of fun. You can just sort of look at the map and see cluster here and then nothing going on here and speculate and having a little bit of fun with that. How did they come up with this number? Well, again, it's for the most part, it's simplified over this. The first thing they looked at was spending on arts, and income. And then the second thing was numbers of artists present. And then the third thing they looked at, which is maybe more controversial, was government grants. How many government grants do you get? Their reasoning for including government grants was that if your state government is giving money to something, it must be valued in that place. Otherwise, the people that were giving the money would get voted out. It must represent some kind of level of support, and they're interested in signs of level of support. So spending money on something is a level of support. Supporting a bunch of artists is a level of support, and grant doing is a level of support. The third thing, the grant deal, probably skews the numbers for Wyoming. Wyoming's third in the nation in state grants to the arts. Third. And it's been like that for a while. 30, thank you. So we ended up doing quite well. So on the heat index, and I've given the 3 heat index numbers for every single county in Wyoming there, we're pretty high. There's a lot of purple. And again, we see it kind of in similar areas, Jackson and Park County again, but also Sublette County, which does pretty well in the CVI, shows up as an interesting place with quite a bit going on. And many of the other counties, some of them surprises, get pretty high numbers here. I've got some doubts about this number set, and the reason I have doubts about it, or I want to see a second iteration, is Sheridan. Sheridan's at the bottom on this set. And it doesn't make sense to me, actually, and it's inconsistent with the stuff that's in the other reports. So then you have to wonder, is something, what's off? Something's obviously off right here with either with the data they got, or there's some anomaly with the period that they collected in, and I don't know what it is, but it raises a certain number of questions, because everything, like I said, there's a consistent strength in Sheridan, Johnson County, and Natrona, and as well as the old standbys, Teton and Park, that go down. And some of these others here are quite high. Some of the strength depends on, you can just look at that third number, which is the government grant support. And the Wyoming Arts Council has got grants everywhere. 400 grants, I think, last year. So in a sense, the grant levels are out of sight. So what might we conclude from this? And here I'm going to turn to really sort of another issue and a concern. I might talk about that a little bit more. I'm on the board of the Wyoming Arts Alliance. So as Maggie said, I have been doing arts advocacy, and that's our statewide arts advocacy organization. We have a lobbyist in Cheyenne. We pick issues that we lobby for. We have a pretty good success rate. We call up people. We do it in the Wyoming way. It's very individual. We pick on individual senators and representatives, get to know them, and make our case. And so we've had success in getting operating support grant for the Arts Council, in having the arts added to the Hathaway Success curriculum, and in dealing and sustaining the Arts Council budget. We don't usually look at a lot of issues. We usually look at just a couple of things there. But then our question is, if I'm looking at the data, and I'm also looking at what's on the ground here in Wyoming, what does the Wyoming Arts Alliance do next? Well, we'll talk about this a little bit. In Sheridan, on October 3rd, we're having a meeting. It's a service meeting for nonprofits, but if you're curious, keep your eye on the newspaper, and there'll be a chance we'll be down there mostly at the Wyoming Theater, having a meeting, and it's a block booking conference, but we'll have some workshops to help arts nonprofits going on. Within the world of arguments for the arts, we oftentimes hear economic arguments. I'm less interested in that. You can, of course, people who go to a play come from out of town, spend some money and do that. But the economic argument, it's the same problem that they have with sports. Somebody says, oh, the Denver Broncos make this much money for the state of Colorado. Well, they don't. If the Denver Broncos weren't there, people would spend the money on something else. So, that's really the same issue with the arts. And yeah, artists get paid and they spend money, but so does everybody else, so big deal. I'm by myself on that one. The rest of the board just says, we're using the arguments, and it's a lot more technical kinds of things. Second one is arts seem to go along with revitalized places. So there's almost a kind of national mantra right now. Start a little arts center in your decaying downtown and watch other businesses come there. We've seen this in Wyoming. They do it in Sheridan. So Sage moving to a downtown, Main Street gallery is something of that ilk. And it happened in Rawlins, happened in Rock Springs. Casper, we've just opened a fantastic arts center. Worked on it for a bunch of years. It cost $1 million. We would never have started this if we'd known that. We thought it was going to cost about $200,000, but it's taken off like a banshee. And it's the old Casper Artists Guild. Their membership tripled after the Arts Center opened. They got young people in there, and we're showing local artists, and we have an opening every single month, and hundreds of people are streaming through. I was there on Thursday, and just crowds of people are walking through. So those kinds of things are nice. But I think more important than just perking up downtown is signs of civic engagement or vibrancy. And the fact that there's a connection between arts and communities that are functioning well is interesting. But at the end of the day, really, the arts are about two sorts of things, which is having fun. It's pleasure. I like to play the guitar. That is fun for me. I like working with metal, making gates and things like that. I like it. That's what I want to do. When I retire, I'm going to write a novel. More or less half the population of the United States thinks this. That's more than read. More people think they can write a book than want to read one. Well, we got writers going on all over the place, and part of it is personal development and individual fulfillment. So at the end of the day, people do art sometimes to enhance the meaning of their life, give some significance to what's going on. So that's nice, but then the question we've got is two things. How does the civic vitality argument work? And I think I'm not going to play out the whole scenario here, but I'll just say that if you think about something like a community theater, or you think about a play that's been seen, what's behind all of that? A bunch of people had to work together to find a venue. They had to select a play. There was a bunch of performers and actors that had to collaborate and work together. They had to do a whole lot of things that are useful in a good community that can get things done. So you're kind of training yourselves or practicing good citizenship when you do something collaborative like that. Going and writing your squirrely novel by yourself probably doesn't work that way. Yeah. Oh, God. I've got a former student, I said, I want to be a writer. And so I said, sure, I'm going to be a writer and do that. Well, son of a bitch, she did it, but she's writing dirty books about elves. Selling well. It's called paranormal erotica, and uses a pseudonym, and I'm reading the books, and yep, they're dirty books, all right, and I guess she found fulfillment, and she's making a living doing this too, so that's fine. But I think then the other question, the other challenge that we have, and this is something I was talking a little bit with Jason about last night, is, okay, we've got evidence that we've got a lot of art going on in Wyoming. I think I'm convinced of that, a lot, maybe more than many places. And we've also got evidence that there's a lot of access to doing things. People are able to practice what they want and participate. The third thing you want, though, is this vibrancy, which is really, at the end of the day, not money spending, not government grants, it's excellence. We got really strong programs here. I don't have any evidence that we do, and sometimes things that I see suggest that we don't. And so I think, in the maturing of the state, figuring that out, and there'll be a number of answers to doing that. Part of it may be revitalized or improved arts education across the board, creative projects such as the theater project that I've learned about here in Sheridan, and probably more interaction between our different arts venues and practitioners in the state. So anyway, I was going to do a little more soapbox stuff here, but that's fine. I'd like to stop right now because really there's a lot of stuff right here, and all of you know something about it, and I'm always kind of looking for new perspectives or new information or help with understanding this thing. So I'll stop my talk and maybe we can have a conversation. Yay, the talk is over. Now let's talk. You got any? I skipped over some things. Please.
Tell me what your objective is going to be on October 3rd in Sheridan. What are you going to try to do at that meeting?
Oh, okay. Wyoming Arts Alliance is an advocacy group that's also a service organization for arts nonprofits, in particular ones that are presenting venues, such as the WYO Theater or the Park County Arts Council that does that. And so we'll have some acts that people might be able to book that they can take a look at, and then we will have workshops on running a nonprofit, workshops on making a good board, workshops on recruiting young leaders, workshops on making your product and finding excellent arts, workshops in dealing with finances, things like that. And that's certainly kind of a big issue in Wyoming, that you get out to small towns and there's a lot of enthusiasm for doing something, and the level of knowledge is low, so people are kind of just flying by the seat of their pants. And I think this is the next big challenge, I think, for us and for the Arts Council, and for the colleges and the university too, is providing training that will help arts nonprofits flourish and function. Good boards is that is the main thing. Boards kill organizations, or make them flourish, and there's a lot known. So maybe you want to go if you got some interest. People that have some engagement with nonprofits would probably like to go, and you'll meet some folks from around the state who could tell you things.
Anything in the works to supplement this data we got, rather than just relying on the tax return? Like you said, there's thousands of people out there, part-timers that never write it down before.
Absolutely. No, I'd really like some on-the-ground studies, say, from university grad students surveying. So one of the most interesting ones that I've ever seen, it's not discussed too much, Andrea Graham and grad student, I think it was an anthro, okay? It was anthro, all right. Went out and tried to find all the folk artists operating in Crook County And they didn't do it out of data at all. They just drove around and met people and had people introduce them. And they did this for, I think, 2.5, 3 weeks, and more or less saw everything. And the conclusion was kind of wild. It was actually, there was some substantive artwork going on at almost every single ranch in Crook County. And a lot of it was stuff that you didn't immediately think about as arts, but it was these gates to the ranches, beautifully done, individualized, crafted and sculpted gates. And so really, I think, then, you know, I might do a little of it myself in my retirement day, but I think on the ground, descriptive stuff is really what's much more interesting. And maybe do that for Casper. Yeah, Jill.
Have you thought about mining census data?
Oh, that census is kind of in a lot of this, but there's more. And one of the things I didn't mention that was actually kind of good, the census, you know, when they do the long questionnaire, they included now a question, do you make art at home? Do you do any art yourself? And they found out 3.6% of the people said yes. They do it every day, you know, and they spend 2.5 hours a day. So, you know, that's interesting. And there's some European studies that get much, much more detailed on how people live their lives and do that. We are overwhelmed. I think partly it's the advocacy world, but also it might be the analysis. I think I'm not in the social sciences. I teach Shakespeare. I work out William Blake. I work on weird literature. Work on Wyoming living authors too. That's a little fun. That was the other talk I thought about doing, was talking about them. But social sciences, I think, moving ahead on this kind of stuff is a step beyond using things that are quite dollar-based and number-based, which people have been very comfortable with. So, and I think that's been a difficulty actually in lots of advocacy efforts. That people tend to look at the dollar payoff, and actually, you know, at the end of the day, that isn't exactly what people care about. They care about something else. You don't really care about how much money the state park system brings in. You just like the state parks. You just want a good state park. You know, we do these kinds of things because people like them. And so I think attention to what people like and to happiness is probably the next data frontier. There are happiness studies around the world too. Our country's sort of happy, you know, in most of these things. The Brits seem kind of grumpy.
Maybe not. Explain a little bit about CVI. What's puzzling me a little bit is Weston County, which is ends up being the third, and Newcastle doesn't strike me as being a very
anomaly.
Yeah, and then Albany, which is Laramie, which is
Albany is artificially low for a bad reason, and it's a defect in the CVI. They don't count anybody that works in higher education. So you've got, let's just say Bill Downs, the playwright and theater instructor there at the universities. He's writing a play like every 4 months, you know, and producing them all over the place, and busy. He just called the professor. He doesn't count in the art number. So I bugged them about that. I just said, why do you do it? And they said, well, it just really throws off the numbers for places like Bloomington, Indiana, say, you know, which has the enormous University of Indiana with an enormous music school. And so, but I think it's makes the material stupid. The anomalies are funny because I spent a long time kind of talking to them like, what happened here with Weston County? Because that's not just going, it doesn't meet the eyeball test. But the Weston County went back to where I expected after the anomaly. Just go to Laramie and what do you see? Well, you see murals all over downtown, big professional high-end mural project that's developing. You see a couple of galleries. You see a stream of things happening at the University of Wyoming. It's a robust arts place. Are we done?
I think we're done.
You're welcome.